Hello and welcome to the channel. In today's video, we discuss how to go about building a private medical practice in Switzerland. Let's say you're a qualified medical doctor from a European country, and for one reason or another, you wish to live and work in Switzerland. How do you go about this? Well, I shall explain the steps you need to consider to achieve this goal in this video. First step is to get yourself registered. The governmental body that deals with this in Switzerland is the MEBECO, the Medizinalberufskommission in German. MEBECO. Now, before I go any further, this brings me actually to an important point. In Switzerland, there are 4 official languages: German, French, Italian, and Romanish. There are 26 cantons, if you like, counties or states in Switzerland. And each canton will have its own official language. In some cantons, there may be even 2. For example, in Bern, both French and German are official languages. The same is true of the canton of Fribourg. In some cantons or cities, there may be just one official language, but then there is another prevalent language by virtue of a large community that speak that language. So even though that second language may not be official, you may still be required to offer that language as a doctor in that canton or city. Put it this way, it makes you simply more competitive. An example of such a canton will be Graubünden, otherwise known as Les Grisons in French, or Grigioni in Italian, especially in the region of St. Moritz, the winter ski resort, Celerina, and that area, that surrounding area. In that particular area, you will be, of course, required to speak German, but Italian would be a huge advantage given the huge population of Italian-speaking, either native or locally resident people, or indeed visitors who come from Italy or the Tyrol, who are either pure visitors or who just own properties in that area. English is widely considered as a 5th unofficial language in Switzerland, so it's always an advantage to have English as one of your languages. Because, in fact, many of the postgraduate exams for doctors are conducted in English, believe it or not. I mentioned Romanish above. Now, this is an interesting language. Sounds like Italian. There are lots of, obviously, French origin words, well, French being of the same root as Italian in that they are both Latin languages, but Romanish, at least the one that is spoken in Switzerland, also has a lot of German words in it. It's a very beautiful language. It is only spoken in the kind of the mountain areas, so Grigioni, Graubünden, Les Grisons, as I mentioned above. This language is spoken there as well. It's unofficial language, actually, in addition to German. And strangely enough, Italian is not an official language. Very strange, but there we have it. Romanish is also spoken in the mountain areas of neighboring Italy. And although there may be, of course, a dialect of Romanish spoken in these other sort of from the Italian side of the mountainous border with Switzerland. But in general, no one is required to, especially if you're a visitor from outside of Switzerland, you're not required to ever learn Romanish, even if it's an official language, because usually you can always get by with German and Italian, as the case may be. It is, however, officially taught in schools. I don't know if this makes any difference to the need to speak Romanish if you're a pediatrician in that case. Note that officially you are only required to know or learn one of the official languages of any canton if there are more than one official languages. Of course, as ever, it's an advantage if you have all the other languages in that canton that are spoken under your belts, but actually you only need one. The level of proficiency you need as a doctor in Switzerland is B1 level. Although I have to admit, some institutions, big hospitals who are in need of doctors in a specific specialty, for example, may accept A2 level, but then you may have to then commit to attend language school until you are proficient enough or you've reached the required B1 level, let's say within 3 to 6 months. So in some situations, employers are flexible. But here we are specifically talking about building your own practice. So obviously you want to be as competitive as possible because you're competing with other people who are also building their own practice. And if you can get any advantage to leverage your practice as a better practice in comparison to the next one, then go for it. Get whatever advantage you can get your hands on. And in Switzerland, language is certainly one such leverage point. So let's say you are a polyglot doctor from, say, the UK, and you want to set up a practice in Switzerland. Congratulations, you are well ahead of the curve. Switzerland accepts medical degrees from most EU countries and the UK. If your level of medical training is equivalent to the position you're wanting to apply for with MEBECO, and this invariably means that you've reached the pinnacle of your training if you want to set up your own practice, basically you should be a specialist, or in German, Facharzt. You should have no problem in registering your original diploma with MEBECO in that case. Often, though, there are discrepancies in equivalencies, and the Swiss medical authorities may require you to prove certain qualifications you have by getting further evidences from your original medical body in your own original country. For instance, a certification from your medical school or training institution that you achieved certain targets. For example, if you are a kidney specialist, how many dialysis cases did you treat? Which is something that may be hard to deduce from your diploma if your diploma does not come from a Western country, a European country, for example. Which brings me on to my next point. Many applicants from non-European or non-EU countries run into obstacles because the Swiss authorities are rather rigid compared to other European countries, other European medical authorities. And often candidates are invited to repeat up to 3 years of medical school before they are allowed to practice medicine in Switzerland. The process is quite stringent, so be prepared to go through the ringer. Once you are registered with MEBECO, you will go on to be registered with the MedReg, the medical register. in Switzerland. The second step is to apply for a medical work permit. In German, Berufsausübungsbewilligung. For the canton, for the specific canton you'll be working in. Each canton does its own thing, and the rules vary widely between cantons. Please do your research before even trying to set up a medical practice, because there are varying restrictions as to how many specialists, especially specialists. This doesn't quite relate to general practitioners because there's a Swiss-wide shortage. So wherever you go, there will be quite a high demand for general practitioners. But with regards to specialists, there are restrictions as to how many a canton is allowed to have. Make sure there isn't a stop sign for the specialty you wish to practice in the canton you are applying in. These stops can be removed after a few years as demand rises for that particular specialty. But of course, you won't be sitting around waiting for this, as it could literally take decades before the restrictions come to an end. So do your research, find out if indeed you are likely to get an Berufsausübungsbewilligung before you start planning a practice in that canton. Step 3. Once you are armed with your MEBECO diploma recognition papers, your registration in the MEDREC, and your Berufsausübungsbewilligung, or simply Ausübungsbewilligung, you are good to go, and actually you can start now setting up your practice. You will need an office, of course. In Switzerland, it varies between specialties what kind of location you should aim for. More and more younger doctors are going for group practices in central locations known as Medizentrums, or simply medical centers, which are advantageous in the sense that you can share the infrastructure with other doctors, whether they're in your specialty or not. You may also have an organization managing the center, organizing the website, the cleaning services, ordering the medical supplies, the data server, internet, phone lines, etc. Or another variation of this is to have an investor company sort out all the setup as well as the initial costs. Basically, they invest in your practice and they hire you to run the practice in a way that you are at one end of the spectrum, basically an employee of this investor, and at the other end of the spectrum, you are a partner in the business, in which case you are a part investor. Or you give up part of your monthly earnings to them and you keep the rest, typically in a kind of 60% for you and 40% to the investor, as opposed to investing initially in the practice as an upfront cost. This is an attractive option actually for many up-and-coming young doctors who have, say, worked their whole career in a hospital as an employee and now want to set up their own business, but they don't have the capital to do so. So this would be a great option for such individuals. For those who are more seasoned, however, the holy grail, of course, is to literally go it alone with either your own investment capital or financing your venture through a bank loan. However you want to do it, a good idea is to first sit down with a financial advisor and critically examine your options. While you're doing all of this, remember you will need at least 1 or 2 co-workers, maybe even more, depending on what you want to do, what kind of practice you want to set up, and how large your patient volume will be. Unique to Switzerland and Austria, and I think also Liechtenstein, if I'm not mistaken, are specially trained practice assistants for general practices. These professionals are a mixture of receptionists, nurses, secretaries, radiographers, and phlebotomists. It's a basically 3-year training course, and at the end of it, a practice assistant, in German, MPA, medizinische Praxisassistentin, can basically run a practice with you. Typically, a large general practice with 2 doctors in it will need about 2 of these MPAs, working on the basis of a total of 120 to 150%. Let's say one working at 80% and the other one at 60 to 70%. One doctor working on their own in their own practice may typically need 100 to 120%, so 1 to 2 MPAs. Be aware though that a current issue in Switzerland right now is a severe shortage of MPAs. So before you fall into this pit, before you launch yourself setting up a practice, just be aware of this problem. You may have to use clever solutions like getting in touch with the MPA schools and offering the new recruits a job even before they sit their final exams. Or even better, you can offer them your practice to train in whilst they are undergoing their training as a practice that is a training center for MPAs. But of course, to do this, you do need to have full-time MPA trainer in your practice, or maybe 2 part-time MPA trainers. So it's a chicken and egg situation. Another way to get around this problem would be to do a collab with another practice that is already training MPAs, so that you are an official partner and there's a partner program that you can join. But this will need to be approved by the MPA school. They will need to come and check out your practice to make sure you have all the necessary requirements to train up an MPA. Step 5 is obviously patience. If you're going to set up a medical practice in Switzerland or anywhere in the world, you obviously need patience. Where are they going to come from? You need to start publicizing yourself early in the game. You have to build a website, perhaps. You can advertise yourself through your colleagues, through your local hospital. Are you a diabetes specialist? Contact local GPs and tell them you'll be opening a practice in 3 months. Are you a GP? Ask your hospital colleagues to tell their patients about you. Your local emergency department will love you if they can cut their workload, because if more patients can go to their GP instead of using the emergency room as a first port of call with stuff that a GP could normally sort out, then you have actually made a difference to the medical system of that city or town. Be creative. Leave flyers in the local old people's home, in the church, even at the dentist or at the vets. Like this, you will hit the ground running. By the time you open your practice on opening day, you will be full of patients who are lining up to come register with you. So there you have it. Part 1 of how to build a private medical practice in Switzerland. In part 2, we will consider the next 5 steps for building your own practice, a medical practice in Switzerland. In the meantime, stay healthy, and if you have any questions, do feel free to ask a doc.